Hi, I'm Christine. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm here to wrap up the last half of January. So I'm actually filming this video a lot later than I originally planned to because I have been obsessing and devouring a specific book, which I'm going to talk about in this wrap up as well. I have already started a reread of it. It is totally fine. I love it. I'm obsessed, but I have put off like everything else for the past week because I haven't wanted to do anything else but live in that book, live in that world. So yeah, delayed with this video, but here we are. So for January, I ended up reading 52 books for the month. I do already have my mid-month wrap up, which was for the first 30 books that I read for the first half of January. And then now we're going to chat about the remaining 22 that I have to talk about today. I'm going to kind of quickly go through them. Some of them were rereads, which I have been loving doing for this year, just jumping into more rereads than I usually have done in the past. So I am thriving and loving that. So we're just going to quickly get into all of my reads. Of course, as always, if you ever want to see more of my thoughts or my full reviews on any of the books that I talk about, I do review every single book that I read, and you can get to those reviews on Goodreads, which is always linked in the description of all of my videos. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the 22 books I read for the last half of January. So I had an arc of What Happens at the Lake by Vi Keeland. This one I think I ended up giving 3.5/ rounding up to 4 stars. This one, it is out now. It had been quite a few years since I had picked up anything from this author, so I decided to give it a try. This one is Small Town Grumpy Sunshine. It has forced proximity because the hero and the heroine become neighbors. So in this one, the heroine's actually a scientist for a pharmaceutical company, but she ended up taking time off of that and actually spent time in a mental health facility before the story starts. And so when the story picks up, she is on break from work, just got out of that facility, and she decided to go to the small town that her dad grew up in and always talked about. So she ends up showing up there. She actually was left a house there from her father when he passed away many years ago. I want to say like 10 or 15 years before the story starts. And so she decides to go to that house and kind of like fix it up and maybe just like take a break from her real life. So we see her doing that. And of course, she runs into the grumpy, broody neighbor who is the hero, of course. They have a couple run-ins like right from the start with her running into his mailbox, having items delivered to his house instead of hers. Just all of these like fun shenanigans that bring them together. The hero in this one, like I said, he's very much the grumpy next door neighbor. He was also a former hockey player who had to retire after an injury. And so now he actually owns his own like construction or contractor business. And so when the heroine has projects or needs help with her house, he ends up actually offering and helping her with that. So they end up spending some time together. This one was a bit long at times, and I wasn't as invested as some of the like side plots and side stories we had going on besides the couple. Like I enjoyed their chemistry and banter and all of that. So yeah, it was just okay for me, 3.5/4 stars. Next, I read 3 historical romance arcs, which I have a whole video of talking about those. So I will link that in the description of the video as well as up in the cards. And so the first one up is Her Adventures in Temptation by Megan Frampton. This is the 3rd book in her School for Scoundrels series, and this one I ended up giving 3 stars to. Like I said, I do talk more about all of these historical romances in that other video, so I'm just going to quickly tell you my thoughts on them here. But basically, this one is a road trip situation where the heroine is the sister of, I want to say like a viscount, and the hero ends up showing up at her brother's party. The hero was from like an orphanage. He grew up there. The whole series follows him and his friends who all grew up in the orphanage together. And so basically he ends up getting kicked out of the party for reasons. And so the heroine ends up jumping and deciding to join him or asking him to take her with him because she needs to get to London quickly as well. And so it kind of goes from there. We see their little like road trip carriage adventure to London. And then when they both get there, they both realize they have to kind of be the guardians or the chaperones for 2 people who are having their coming out season. And so kind of it goes from there where they have to like do this fake engagement and all of that things. Like I said, it was just okay for me. I haven't loved this series except for the first book. So yeah, 3 stars for this one. Next was another historical romance arc, which again, I talk about in that video. So it is It Takes a Rake by Anna Bennett. This one is the 3rd book in her Rogues to Lovers series. And this one I ended up giving 4 stars to. This series I've really enjoyed, and I feel like they're very charming. And like, I love that they're set outside of London, outside of the ballrooms. They are set at this really cute little like seaside harbor town. And so we followed the kind of people who live there, kind of like the everyday man and kind of the people away from society life. So in here, the heroine is an architect and the hero is as well. They were kind of rivals growing up, and they both worked for his grandfather's architectural company. And so they've always had this kind of like, from her side especially, like this kind of like animosity towards one another of trying to like outdo each other. So he ends up showing back up in town in their hometown where she still lives, and he's there to take over his grandfather's business where she works at. There is like this architectural competition going on in the city, and so it goes from there with her asking him for help on her project, and in return she says she'll help him kind of like score a lady. And so she talks about how he is the total opposite of a rake and how women, especially her, are very much into rakes. And so he ends up asking her to help him become a rake to impress the lady somebody that he secretly likes, which of course is her, and she just doesn't realize it. So I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was super cute and fun. I loved how the hero was like secretly into her, pining for her for years, and she had no idea. I really liked that aspect of the story. I will say I thought it was going to be like a 5-star read up until maybe the 65-70% mark, when she kind of realizes what he's been doing the whole time, of the fact that he actually likes her and has been trying to impress her without her knowing. And so her reaction from there and where the plot kind of goes was not my favorite. So yeah, 4 stars for this one. It is out now though. And then the third historical that I read for that video, which is an arc and it actually comes out in February, is In Want of a Viscount by Lorraine Heath. This is the 3rd book in her Chessmen series, and I love this book with everything that I have. I gave it 5 stars. This book I feel like especially you will love more if you have already read her Sins for All Seasons series, as the hero in this one is brothers with the hero of the 1st book in that series, and you kind of see his backstory with his father and his family in that book. So yeah, I feel like with Lorraine Heath's books, like all of her books have connections. They all have familiar characters that we see again. And this book in particular, I feel like you will especially love it more if you've already read that series. Not to say that the book doesn't stand on its own, because it totally does, but I just loved those connections and it made sense for the hero's kind of like backstory. So basically in here, the hero is the total opposite of how his father was. His father was kind of the worst, like literally the worst. He had multiple mistresses, he had his wife, he cheated on everybody and everyone. He was like setting up franchises all over the place with having all of these children born on the wrong side of the blanket. And so the hero has never wanted to be compared to his father. He hated how he was, he hates how he still is. And so he has done the total opposite his whole life, trying to prove that he is nothing like his father. He doesn't want to be compared to him. So he ends up meeting the heroine, who is an American. She is actually kind of an heiress, but more like a businesswoman who's in town with her brother and her mother and trying to save her family's business. She's also like an engineer, a bit of an inventor herself, which I loved to see. So she's in town to get investors for her typewriter that she's been working on. And so she ends up meeting the hero and his friends, who are also investors. So when she meets the hero, she actually realizes that she already knows him. They met at a club a previous night, where it is a club where basically women can go to kind of fulfill fantasies. And so she went there for a kiss. The hero was the one who ended up giving her a said kiss. He went there to visit his brother, and his brother was like, hey, we really quickly need help in one of the rooms. Like, all of our gentlemen are busy. Can you go help out this lady with a kiss? And so they shared that kiss. And so they already have this like kind of connection. And so it kind of goes from there. I just loved how quiet and slow and beautiful this romance was. It was just so good. I love how the heroine has always been seen as kind of an outsider, or people think she's kind of odd and strange, how she is super into inventions and the engineering of everything, like how things work and all of that. And so I loved in here how the hero sees that in her and goes out of his way to take her to places that he knows she'll love because of that. Like, he definitely speaks her love language. I just loved them together. It was just super satisfying to see because of both of their backstories with their family histories. I just love this one so much. It's out on February 20th, and I definitely recommend picking it up. Then I went back to contemporaries and picked up Loving Romeo by Laura Pavlov. This is the 1st book in her Magnolia Falls series, which is a new small town series from her. And this one I really enjoyed and gave it 5 stars. So this one is a small town, kind of hate to love. There's like a little bit of feuding families going on and all of that kind of history. The hero and the heroine actually become like business neighbors as well. And so we have that like forced proximity. This is also a sports romance where the hero was a former boxer who has now kind of stepped back and retired, and he owns a gym. And so the story kind of goes from there with the heroine moving back to her small town. Her family's kind of like royalty there. Like, they own a ton of businesses. They are super beloved, all of those things. While the hero and kind of his friends that he hangs out with are kind of looked at as like the opposite side of the tracks kind of vibe. So we have that going on. So I actually love the Rocky franchise, and this book is kind of has nods or similarities to that, which Laura Pavlov herself is a fan of the Rocky franchise. And so she even talks about like the nods and winks to that in her series. So I loved it. Basically, the hero in here, he has retired from fighting, but somebody is kind of taunting and bullying him in public on like press conferences and stuff, kind of like wanting him to have a fight again with him and get back in the ring. So that is kind of going on. The heroine as well, like I said, she's moved back to the small town, is trying to start up her kind of coffee shop business right next door to the hero's gym. So it kind of goes from there. Something happens to her where he has to kind of step in and protect her, and they kind of grow close from there. He definitely has some conflicted feelings with her family and kind of the history of all of that. And I liked seeing how it kind of developed from there. I really enjoyed this one. Like I said, I gave it 5 stars. It's probably like a low 5 stars for me, but I still really enjoyed it, and I'm excited for the rest of the series. Next up, I had an audio ALC of Midnight Ruin by Katie Robert. This is the 6th book, I think, in her Dark Olympus series, and this one ended up giving it 4 stars too. So this whole series has had a lot of hits and misses for me, but I always do enjoy them, especially on audio. Like, if I couldn't get the audio ALCs or like listen to them on Libby, I probably honestly wouldn't pick them up. But since with the library and like getting them with audio ALCs, series, and since I'm not having to pay anything for those, I feel like I pick the series up. Otherwise, I don't know if I would pick them up, if that makes sense. So this whole series, I've always said that the kind of political side of it has not interested me at all. It kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, and so I kind of don't go in for those. I just go in for like the fun, entertaining, smutty times. As the series has gone on as well, I feel like the Greek mythology of it all has kind of fallen to the wayside, especially with this book. So I just enjoy them for like a smutty, entertaining time, if that tells you anything. So yeah, this one is MFM, and I just had a good time with it. One of the couples is a second chance situation. Another one is like friends to lovers, which both of those are my favorite things. So I had a good time with this one. Like, it is what it is. Is it an all-time favorite series? Definitely not. But like, for what they are, they're entertaining. So yeah. That's that. So then next up, I ended up jumping into the Brides of Kylor series by Zoe Draven. I have heard about this series for I feel like over a year now, and this author in general. I always get recommended their books, and I always hear about them and have been wanting to check them out. So I finally did. I decided to jump into this series first just because there was only 2 books out and they were easy for me to get into. So first up, I jumped into Desire in His Blood, which of course is the first book in the Brides of the Kylor series. This one's an arranged marriage with also an enemies to lovers situation. The hero in here is this like alien berserker vampire kind of combination, which I thought was super interesting. This one I enjoyed most of it. I gave it 4 stars. I feel like there were a lot of things happening. I really liked seeing the kind of world being explored and the whole like sci-fi aspect of it. I liked how the hero as well was kind of set on revenge against the heroine's family. I liked seeing that kind of come to play, and with this whole like arranged marriage setup. I do think some of the parts went on a little bit too long, so I wasn't like super in love with it. I actually expected to love it more than I did just because of how many friends love this author and series, and so I was expecting to be more invested, but yeah, I ended up giving it 4 stars. So then I jumped into the second book in the series, which is Craving in His Blood, again by Zoe Draven. This is the second book of the Brides of the Kylor series. So this one again I ended up giving it 4 stars too. There are actually parts of this book, especially like the beginning, that I was liking more than the first book, but then there were some parts later on in the story that I didn't like as much as I did in book 1. So they kind of like fit each other in different ways of me personally liking them. So yeah, 4 stars for this one. I liked the connection between the hero and the heroine in this one, and how he is kind of determined to have her from the beginning, and she's the one who's more reluctant, and so kind of seeing the reasonings behind that was super interesting to me. So I've enjoyed this author's writing. Like I said, I didn't like obsess and love them as much as I thought I would. They're not 5 stars, but they're all like a good solid 4 stars for me. So I'm excited to check out this author's other books and series as well. I think like the Horde King series, I feel like I hear about that series a ton. So let me know if I should pick up that series next, or if there's like another series from this author that you think I will love. Next, I jumped back into historical romance. So I picked up The Bachelor Bargain by Madison and Michaels. So I actually heard about this one from Ava from Ava's Romance Books. She read this one for her historical romance vlog, where I did a video as well in the middle of January where a bunch of booktubers who love historical romance did like historical romance vlogs, and we all read different books. So it was fun watching everybody's videos and seeing what everybody else loved as well. And so this was one that she loved in hers, and so I decided to pick it up and try it out because I had never heard of it before, and it was available on Hoopla for me. So yeah, I jumped into it. This one sadly I didn't love. It took me quite a while to get into the story, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. There were definitely moments in here that I liked. I felt like the story was just a little too long, and the couple was apart for a lot of it, which I didn't enjoy. What I did like though was the disability rep. In historical romance, the heroine has a cane. I did like the premise of this one as well, where basically the heroine is tired of men getting away with everything, kind of using and abusing and throwing away or discarding women. One of her best friends actually ends up getting killed when the story has started, and so she's kind of wanting to get revenge and expose these men for the things that they're doing. And so I liked that whole aspect of it, and the fact that the hero is kind of a morally gray type guy that she ends up going to. So yeah, the hero is definitely more of an anti-hero. I loved how he has very much like touch her and die vibes and energy. The way he got like so upset when he finds out that somebody took away the heroine's cane. So yeah, there were definitely parts that I liked. I didn't like love it. So 3 stars for me, but I know that it is available like on audio from Hoopla and Libby, so definitely check that out if you haven't. So then I was a beta reader for Pam Godwin's new dark romance that is coming out in, I want to say March, I believe is what she has for the release date right now. It is called Hills of Shivers and Shadows. I had so many people tagging me and sending me the story for when she posted on Instagram and was asking for kind of beta readers, especially people from Alaska, because that is where this trilogy is going to take place. And so I jumped on that right away and was so excited for a new release from her, just because it's been, I think, 4 years since she's had a release. So I was very very, very excited. So this one I don't want to say too much just because it was a beta read and like I don't know if she's going to change a lot of things. But I do know like arcs are coming out soon too, so I'm not sure. Like I was able to read it. I'm definitely counting it towards my reading for the month because I think it was like over 700 pages. It was definitely a chunky book. So I did have a lot of thoughts about it. Definitely some kind of conflicting thoughts, mixed feelings, I guess you could say. Definitely lots of trigger warnings and content warnings and tropes involved in here, which some worked more for me than others. But basically the gist of it is that this woman ends up being kidnapped and abducted. She lives in Alaska. She's taken to kind of a remote place in Alaska. And when she's there, she finds herself with not just the guy who kidnapped her, but he has 3 other men who live there as well. And so it kind of goes from there. It's very much like a survival story with some secrets and things that come out along the way. There were things I liked, things I didn't. So yeah, like I said, mixed feelings, conflicted feelings. So yeah, there was that. We'll see where it goes because like I said, I don't know if she's gonna make any changes from like that other people besides just me obviously who also beta read it and maybe sent into her. So I don't know, I'm curious to see and definitely curious to see what others think of it when it comes out. All right, and then I jumped into a reread of House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas. So I was rereading the Crescent City series to get geared up for the 3rd book that was coming out at the end of the month. So this was my 3rd time reading the Crescent City series and again 5 stars. I love this series so much. It's actually one of my favorite series by her. So yeah, there's that fantasy romance, kind of like urban fantasy setting. I love this series and characters so much. I could talk about them for years and never get tired of it. So yeah, another reread and I loved it again. So then I had an arc of Untether by Elodie Hart. This is the 4th book, part of her Alchemy series. This is basically a sex club series that takes place in London. We've gotten all of the kind of co-owners books so far in the series, and so this was the last kind of partner of the co-owners getting his book. This one comes out on February 8th, so it comes out shortly after I'm going to be posting this video. So I have really enjoyed this series. This one in particular, I gave it 4 stars to. Some of the other books in the series have dealt more with kind of grief for characters and religious trauma for others, and so this book was just fun and entertaining. Like it didn't deal with kind of any of those situations. It was just a good time, which was a fun time for me as well. So this one has age gap with the heroine being older than the hero. And so the heroine in this one has recently been divorced. She is an American kind of journalist living in England. And so she married into this like aristocracy type of family where her husband is just this like very fancy guy who he ends up having a lot of mistresses. And so that kind of comes out to the press and to the public. And so that's kind of how her marriage blows up with hearing about it in the press of all of his mistresses coming forward. And so she ends up getting divorced. So she ends up going to the Alchemy Club to kind of ask about doing a documentary there because like I said, she's already a journalist. And so she wants to kind of explore this reclaiming of her sexuality, especially being a divorced woman in her 40s. And she kind of wants to showcase that. And so she gets partnered up with the hero as kind of her sexual guide, so to speak. Like I said, this one was just a fun time. The hero and the heroine are very much opposites. And I loved how this one didn't dig in too deep. Like it was a little bit surface level, but I felt like it was just fun and entertaining and needed after some of the other books in the series have been a little bit more heavy with some of their themes. So this one was just a fun time. So yeah, 4 stars for this one. So then I had an audio ALC of A Love Song for Ricky Wilde by Tia Williams, and this one I ended up giving it 4 stars to. So this one comes out on February 6th, which I think will be out or possibly be coming out when I post this video. So this one I did have really high hopes for. I loved the 7 Days of June by this author a couple years ago now, and this one was one of my like 5-star predictions for the year. And so it didn't quite live up to the hype of what I thought it would be for me, but I did really enjoy it as well. That said, I can see how this book isn't going to be for everybody, especially if you come in with expectations of not knowing exactly what it's about. So basically this kind of gives off vibes of a contemporary romance or maybe like a little bit of historical fiction in there with the Harlem Renaissance and all of those mentions in the blurb. So this one is definitely a magical realism book. So I personally love magical realism, so I think that's why I had a good time with it, but I can definitely see how others are going to read it and possibly not enjoy it just because not knowing that that is part of the story. So I think it's important to know. Basically in this one, the heroine is from a very like kind of wealthy, powerful family in Atlanta, and she's kind of the oddball of the family. Her family owns a bunch of chains of funeral homes, and so they kind of have expectations for themselves where she's kind of more artsy and wants to own her own like plant shop one day. And so she ends up finally taking off and moving to New York where she rents an apartment, she opens up her plant shop, all of those things. So we kind of see her story unfold from there. I will say this one was very hard to get into at the beginning. It is very slow and kind of more of a, I don't know, I don't want to say like literary fiction, but kind of just more of a fiction-y type vibe to it, if you know what I mean, like just following the heroine's story and seeing her make friends and set up her shop and all of those things. And then the romance kind of kicks in a little bit later with seeing this guy who is kind of like very mysterious and shows up at spots, and she ends up finally talking to him and meeting him, and it kind of unfolds from there. So basically this one has like a very star-crossed lovers vibe, and I kind of liked seeing the celebration of Black art and history and set against kind of modern day Harlem and Renaissance glamour. I will say this one kind of gave me vibes of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which if you've read that one, I guess you will kind of see where the story is kind of going. So yeah, I give it 4 stars. It is out at the beginning of February, so definitely check it out. I feel like if you like magical realism and maybe a little bit different than just a contemporary romance, you might enjoy this one. Then I had an audio ALC of Ashes of You by Catherine Cowles. This is the 5th and final book in the Lost and Found series. Definitely have some thoughts about the series ending, some bittersweet thoughts. I always hate when a series that I love ends, but at the same time, I love this book so much. It's definitely one of my favorites of the series. I give it 5 stars. So this book is out on February 8th, and I highly recommend checking it out. If you haven't checked out this series yet, I do recommend checking it out. It has some of my favorite books from Catherine in it. I will say Echoes of You is still top tier. I love that book so much, which is the 2nd book in the series. But this one, Ashes, actually might be my 2nd favorite in the series now. So this one is an age gap, romantic suspense, small town, single dad, nanny romance, where the hero in this one has 3 sons and the heroine ends up becoming his nanny. They have a little bit of a history as well, with kind of some things that are revealed as the story goes on. It is slow burn. It has found family. I love the protective vibes in here, like not just from the hero, but his 3 sons with the heroine as well. So sweet, so funny. His sons had me dying laughing. I loved seeing them all together. I just loved this book so much. The suspense in this one was done really well. I love the slow burn of the romance. It just made sense for the story. Like I said, I loved this whole family together, like not just the couple. Loved seeing her with his sons as well. Love this one so much. The audiobook narrators are so good. Definitely check this one out. Ashes of You, February 8th. 5 stars, loved it so much. Next, I read The Gift by Julie Garwood. So this was the Historical Hellions book club pick for January, which I am now a co-host of for the new year. And so I loved reading this one. I actually gave it 4.5 stars. This one was just so much fun. Basically in here, it is an arranged marriage, child bride situation. And then we cut to many years later, like 14 years later, and we see the couple back together. The hero basically comes to abduct the heroine, and at the same time, she's actually escaping for reasons and trying to get away. And so she kind of like perfectly falls into his arms at the right time. The hero was a notorious like pirate in his past and also a bit of a spy situation. So we have all of that going on, and she ends up on his ship with him, with her aunt as well. And then of course all of his crew. I just had a good time with this one. It's so fun and endearing and sweet. I love the heroine. Like she is definitely naive, but not in like a too stupid to live kind of moment. Just kind of in a, she doesn't know, like she's just very naive, but willing to learn and wanting to please people and be the best that she can be. Like she wants to make sure his crew loves her. She wants to feed them and help them, but things definitely go wrong along the way. And it was just like super fun and charming. Like I feel like Julie Garwood's books feel like a warm hug that are just comforting and sweet. And this one was definitely that. I had a good time with this one at 4.5 stars. This month was definitely heavy with arcs. And so I ended up giving to Ready or Not by Cara Stone, which comes out on February 13th. So it comes out soon. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. So this one is a surprise pregnancy, which you know with the blurb, with the beginning of the story, it's going to be a surprise pregnancy where the heroine ends up having to kind of deal with that, as well as falling for her best friend's brother along the way. And so this one I really enjoyed. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars. Like I don't want to say you'll enjoy it more if you have been a parent, but I feel like you definitely will. Like it deals a ton with like pregnancy and all of those thoughts of becoming a first-time mom, the pregnancy being a surprise, kind of the thoughts and feelings of what are you going to do about that, like seeing how other people react to that situation, of kind of putting their own thoughts and feelings on the heroine's news, and like her kind of having to be careful with how she talks about it because she's worried about offending other people all the time. So I felt like it definitely explores a ton about pregnancy and motherhood and kind of all of those situations. I loved it. I love the hero in here. He's a super sweet cinnamon roll hero. Also her like childhood friend, but also her best friend's brother. And so we kind of see that being explored, as well as her situation with the father of the baby and kind of that involvement as well. And so yeah, it's just really sweet, really beautiful. Tons about like the whole pregnancy journey. I really enjoyed it. 4 stars. Then I had an audio ALC of Canadian Boyfriend by Jenny Holiday. So this one I ended up giving 3 stars to. This is the newest release from this author, which I've read quite a few of her books in the past, and this one I thought was just okay. Not gonna lie, the audiobook being narrated by the actor Joshua Jackson may or may not have been why I wanted to check this one out, just saying. So this book is actually described as a rom-com, which I feel like is definitely the wrong way to label this book. It's definitely a lot more emotional and deeper than that, dealing with kind of loss and grief and all of those things. In here, the heroine is a former ballerina and the hero is a hockey player, and he's a single dad and he's widowed, and they end up like knowing each other in current day because she is the teacher of his daughter, like one of her dance classes, and so they know one another that way, and he asks her to kind of look out or help out his daughter, like drive her to and from practices and things, because his hockey season is about to start up and he recently lost his wife. Like I think it's been a year when the story starts of how long it has been since he's been widowed, so she kind of starts helping them out, and then we realize that she actually knows him from her past as well. So basically they actually met when they were teenagers, where she was working at a mall and he was there for hockey things or something or another in town, and so she ended up like super crushing on him and becoming obsessed with him. Like they had maybe one or two encounters, that was it, but she decided to elaborate because she's a teenager and form this like whole secret boyfriend thing where she told everybody she was dating this like made up character who was based on him like her whole life to get out of social situations and all of those kind of things when she was picked on in high school. And so she has always like written these letters to him over the years and all of these things, and so now she's like with him, like the person she based this fake boyfriend on. And so it kind of goes from there, jumping back and forth through time and seeing her letters as well to him over the years. So this one I just had a hard time with. I felt like the writing wasn't my favorite. I also couldn't stand how the heroine constantly refers to him as her Canadian boyfriend, like Canadian boyfriend, Canadian boyfriend, Canadian boyfriend. She also, when she knows him as well in present day, always refers to him as his first and last name, like together. She doesn't like separate it or just call him his first name, even when they start getting together. Like she still calls him his first and last name together, which I felt like was just so odd. Like, I don't know, it felt weird, like who talks like that? So I don't know, I had issues with it, and I wasn't really a fan of seeing her letters to him through the years as well. And of course, you know, like what the conflict is going to be. So yeah, 3 stars for it. Wasn't my favorite. Then I did a reread of House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas, of course, book 2 in the Crescent City series. Again, this is my 3rd time reading this series. Love it so much. 5 stars, picks up where book 1 left off, and is just a ride. I love these characters so much. This book has always been 5 stars for me, and it always will be. Then I decided to kind of take a break and jump into a novella. So I picked up a Highland Christmas by Samantha Young. This is part of her Highlands series. I think this one is like 2.5 in the series if you want to read it kind of in order. So this one's a novella. It's kind of set around Christmas time, or kind of like a snowed-in situation with the hero and the heroine, where the heroine is the nanny to the hero's son. This one I actually ended up giving 2 stars to. I really didn't enjoy it. I feel like the novella was super disjointed. Like we jump around in time a lot, and I didn't really feel the connection between the characters. Like it just felt a little too smutty too fast. So I don't know. I feel like novellas, usually I love novellas, but they have to really work for me. Like this one just didn't. It just fell apart. Didn't feel connected to the characters. I didn't like how the time jumps were kind of explained, or kind of like jumping back and forth in time with the storytelling. So yeah, 2 stars for me. So then I did a reread of When the Duke Was Wicked by Lorraine Heath. Earlier in the month, I had reread the Scoundrels of St. James series by Lorraine Heath, which is one of my all-time favorite series. And so this one is the spin-off / second generation stories from that one. And so this is the first book in the Scandalous Gentlemen of St. James. And so I love this book. This was like my 3rd time rereading this book. I love it so much. It's always a hit for me, and of course I gave it 5 stars again. So in this one, the hero and the heroine have been friends for years, their entire childhood and life. Their families are best friends, and so the hero has been widowed and has kind of been living life just kind of on the outskirts. Like he doesn't go to society events anymore. He just does what he wants when he wants. He's just like living it up. And so the heroine ends up going to him for help because she is supposed to be coming out in society and getting like a lot of proposals and things like that. And so she wants to make sure that the man who proposes to her is a man who loves her. And so she's like, how can I know if somebody like truly loves me? Like, you've been through this, maybe you could help me out. And so she's also like secretly pined for him for years. So it kind of goes from there. And I just love this book so much. Like I can hear nothing wrong with this book because nothing is wrong with it. Like it's that perfect. I love it. So emotional. This book makes me cry in like multiple parts. I love it so much. Like I just love these characters. So yeah, 5 stars. So then I decided to do another reread, which like I said, I was just waiting for the 3rd Crescent City book. So I was reading like the novella, a couple rereads, because like my mind was on nothing else except for waiting for that book to come out. So I had an audio ALC of 5 Rounds by Nikki Castle. This is the first book in her Fight Game series. I've read this whole series, but this is the first time that she has an audiobook. And so I'm on her like ARC team and got an audio of it. So of course I love this one again, and I gave it 5 stars because that's what I gave it originally. So if you haven't read this series yet, I highly recommend this. Is the first book in the series. And like I said, it's now now out on audio as well. This is an MMA kind of like fighting series where the hero is an MMA fighter and the heroine is his roommate's best friend, who her best friend is a guy who he is roommates with. And basically in here, the heroine ends up kind of losing her apartment, needing a place to stay when the story starts. And so her best friend's like, well, you can stay at my place because I'm going to be gone for a little bit, but like you'll have to live with my roommate who you hate. And so it kind of goes from there. I love how they're both involved in the MMA world and at the gym. They have a lot of connections, but they also like have a hatred for one another, like their banter, the steam. So good, top tier on audio. It was so good. I love Nikki Castle's books. I've read everything that she writes. This series in particular, love it so much. This one, just so good. Definitely check it out. So then lastly for January was House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. Of course, the third book in the Crescent City series. This book was 5 stars all the way. I read it in a day, picked it up as soon as it hit my Kindle, which was a couple hours earlier than midnight on the release date, just because in Alaska, like with the time zones, I actually ended up getting it at 8:30 at night, my time, which was perfection. And then I stayed up way too late reading it and then went to sleep for a little bit, woke up after like 4 hours of sleep and ended up binging the rest and finishing it in a day. I love this book. 2 pieces. Sarah J. Maas is one of those authors where I can hear nothing wrong with her books because there is nothing wrong with her books. I love them so much. This is like one of my favorite series from her. This might be my favorite book from her. I'd have to think about that because of course Silver Flames is like top tier for me, but I love this book so much. Gave it 5 stars. I have thought of nothing else since finishing it. Like all week, that's all I've been living in, remembering, going through it again. My best friend is actually just finishing it up as well as I filmed this video today. So we have been talking the entire time of all of her thoughts on it as well. And like, I just want to live and breathe and be in this world forever. This book was so satisfying. Like so many of my longtime theories were confirmed. I have so many thoughts, so many connections. Can't say too much just because I feel like, you know, spoilers and it just came out, but I loved it so much. Like I could talk about Sarah J. Maas books forever and never ever get tired of them. So if you ever want to talk to me about Sarah J. Maas theories, things, any of that, definitely hit me up because I love talking about her books so much. So yeah, 5 stars for this one. So yeah, I'm actually currently rereading it. I've been tabbing it up and adding all of my notes and things, which is like look at this. So much fun. Like, I don't want to give too much away, but I'm having the best time of my life rereading it, tabbing it up already, annotating, doing all the things. I'm obsessed with this book. I love it so much. Definitely my favorite book of the year so far. We'll see if it's my favorite book of the entire year, but right now, like nothing else can touch this. I love it so much. So yeah, 5 stars for that one. All right, so those are all the books that I ended up reading for the last half of January. Let me know in the comments if you read any of the same books as me. If you have any favorite books that you had in January, let me know that as well. If you want to leave me an emoji instead to let me know that you watched this video, maybe leave me like a crescent moon because this book is all I can think about. So definitely do that. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I will see you in my next one.